Hello, everyone. What is going on, everybody? Just plugging in my computer. Welcome to this YouTube Live, everybody. Sound is good. You guys can hear me. It is working. Let me know where you guys are coming in from. If you are watching this live here as I am talking to my screen, let me know where in the world, where in North America are you guys viewing from? We'd love to hear just where in the world you guys are coming from, just as we kind of kick things off. And we're going to be talking about self-expression, baby. Let's go. Let's get into that self-expression. So where is everyone coming in from, guys? Just let me know in the chat section where in the world, where in North America you may be viewing from. Again, guys, what I want to eventually be able to do with these is I want to create a discussion where it's literally just me engaged in conversation with you guys rather than just me sort of engaged in a monologue. I want to be able to speak to you guys, to have conversations with you guys, to know how I can better support you guys. So I'd love to just hear your questions, like what's like true and alive in your space. Again, I'm talking about self-expression today. And so if you have a question about self-expression, difficulty stepping into your self-expression, difficulties just expressing yourself, Warsaw, Poland, Urzula, the sea witch. I don't even know if they have water in Poland. Warsaw, baby. Let's go, gang, gang. But doesn't have to be about self-expression. Just anything that you have. A New York, Robin W. Let's go. Let's fucking go. Any questions you have, they don't have to be about self-expression. I would love to hear what concerns you. Tell me your troubles. Tell me what troubles you, everyone. I want to know what troubles you. Just tell me your troubles. Okay, so I thought I would start this off. I was looking through my questions that people had asked me, trying to find something that could correlate to what we're talking about here. And so we had someone that asked, and I think this will be where I'm going to start this live, because we got to find an entry point. We got to find a place to enter. And so that sounded dirty. So the question is, how do I stop being calm and soft and a people pleaser to men and be more expressive? Okay. How do I stop being calm and soft and a people pleaser to men and be more expressive? Okay. So the question, if you guys didn't hear, is how do I stop being calm and soft to men and start to be more expressive? Okay, so what we're dealing with here, just first off, is obviously there's a lot of people pleasing. People in the psychological community would call this sort of good girl conditioning. Kind of like good boy conditioning, good girl conditioning, that we don't want to do anything to upset people. We got to do what we got to do to sort of keep the peace, right? I don't want to be polarizing. I don't want to piss anyone off. And so, we're always just going to be doing everything we can just to make sure that everything's okay, right? And so being someone who's agreeable and kind of move with the flow, obviously, in some ways that's a good thing, but sometimes we need everything to be okay, and that's a trauma response, right? We need everything to be okay. And so if you're a woman and you're struggling to be able to directly express yourself and speak your truth to men, there's a lot of things that this entails. But for one, it's relationship to your anger. It's your capacity to be in a healthy integration of your anger. And it's also, a lot of it is the father wound. A lot of it is going to be your relationship with the energetic imprint of dad, right? And so what happens when, we're still holding a strong father wound, ultimately what it means is that we haven't really moved into like a healthy protection against the father wounds, right? So what happens, like with, say, women who are really, really in sort of this good girl conditioning, obviously, like what they're doing is they are watching and perceiving, probably growing up, how mom responded to dad. So she probably would have witnessed that, mom was potentially quite submissive and agreeable just to keep the peace with dad, right? So much of what we're learning about polarity in relationships is not what our parents are telling us, but how we're perceiving the dynamic in our parents, or whatever relationship we were exposed to growing up. Maybe it wasn't our parents, maybe it was grandparents, right? And so potentially that we would have seen mom be so fucking agreeable to dad that I don't want to disrupt, that I want to just make sure everything's okay, right? So we're kind of observing and that we're perceiving, right? So we might have witnessed that. And so when women want to keep the peace with men, oftentimes it means that they have some type of energetic imprint of dad that's still on them. We can call this like an unconscious loyalty, right? We have an unconscious loyalty, which means if I were to, like, even through a somatic practice, express my anger to my dad, that like I feel guilty. That feels really, really uncomfortable, right? And so when we have a hard time being in our anger, what it means is a lot of just energy compresses to us, right? And so, say a woman's really trying to heal her relationship to the father wound, she's got sort of this right side compression, and she can't really be in a healthy expression of her anger to dad, right? Maybe she didn't get her needs met from her father. There were maybe different things that he did that didn't allow her to be seen, to be heard, to kind of be in her power. And she's still holding maybe potentially this sort of guilt about really, really being able to express anger. And so guilt, you guys, is what we call an inhibitory emotion. So it's suppressing a core emotion. So when we feel guilty, oftentimes it means that underneath, right, that we're holding on to the emotions of someone else. So guilt means we're holding on to the emotions of someone else. And that underneath, there's a lot of deeper emotion that we're not able to access, right? And so we live in this space of guilt. And what that really means is that we can't really be in a healthy expression of that anger, which would free up the space, right? We can't really be in a healthy expression of our anger, which would free up the space. And so even just somatically, it's working with the energetic imprint of our father, using our voice just to be able to speak, right? Using our voice just to be able to speak. And so when a woman feels stuck in her capacity to, let's say, be able to challenge a man relationally, I'm not meaning to come at it from this really abrasive energy, but be able to rise in the container of a relationship, to be able to say to any man or to their partner that this doesn't feel good, that something feels off, that this doesn't feel okay, right? It really comes with how the origin of this is at an ancestral level, but also just how we deal with the energetic imprint of our father, right? What is our relationship to the energetic imprint of our father, and actually being just in a healthy protection on the right side of our energetic orbit, right? So how we relate to our dad and potentially what we didn't receive from our father, the boundaries that we have with our father, is really going to set the stage for our body and our nervous system's capacity to be able to move into a relationship and to be able to have the oracle sort of rise into the space and to be like, this isn't okay. Like, this doesn't feel good, right? So when we're in this kind of good girl conditioning, what it probably means is that the archetypes that we experience, the feminine energy, were really meek, we're really sort of docile, we're really sort of submissive. Let's keep the peace, swallowing our truth, sweeping things under the rug, avoidance, all these sort of things. And now we're holding an energetic imprint of our dad that we haven't been able to clear from our space. And ultimately what that means is, again, there's no room for a masculine really, really to move into your space, because the energetic imprint of, the father wound, daddy's little girl, is still sort of in the space. And we haven't cleared that. So there's no actual room for a man to kind of move into his masculine. And also, you're not going to feel safe in your system to challenge a guy. And so let's just go into this idea of, okay, unleashing our self-expression. There's two different tiers to this. Okay. So our capacity to be unleashed in our expression, let our throat chakra move in relationship to the mother wound, the father wound, also the ancestors of origin, right? So much of really unleashing your expression, guys, and I know this might seem like a complex thing, is to break up with your parents and to break up with your ancestors. So when we're someone who needs to really keep the peace, make sure everything's okay, it means that we're still holding these unconscious loyalties. So, guys, mother wound left side, father wound here, you expand even greater Now we have the ancestors of origin. We have the family of origin here. The ancestors of origin are even greater over here. So much of struggling to unleash the throat chakra is our capacity to speak the truth to mom, dad, to the ancestors of origin. Basically, what that means is we're showing up in the same identity that we were conditioned in the family system, right? So, let's say this woman's question was that she kind of shows up is the people pleaser, as sort of the good girl relationally, that she struggles to speak her truth, to express herself to men. Probably what that means is that she was valued and she was found belonging and worth in the family of origin by swallowing her truth, right? She observes it, she witnesses it, but she's also rewarded, which means she finds some sense of value, right? And so what this creates is, I call it a core survival identity. So a core survival identity is, how do we survive the family of origin? When I mean survive, sometimes obviously we come from really difficult containers of abuse. So it literally is about survival. But survival can also just mean, how did I find some semblance of love? How did I find some semblance of getting my greater needs met, right? And so we get conditioned into these sort of identities, right? And oftentimes these conditions that we get, these identities we get conditioned into, they're not in the full support and amplification of unleashing our truth, right? Of being super, super expressed in our soul, right? Obviously, depending on what the dynamic and what the household that we grew up in. And so much of, okay, Jamie, how do I unleash my self-expression? It really is dealing with unconscious loyalties to your parents and to your ancestors. And what that means is really energetic, physical, emotional, spiritual boundaries to mom and dad and to your ancestors, right? And so often when we're enthralled in kind of this good boy or this mama's boy or this sort of good girl conditioning, it means that our energetic field is just so flooded. We're just so fucking imprinted with other energy that doesn't belong to us. And so at a somatic level, learning to be boundaried with the energetic imprint of mom, learning to be boundaried with the energetic imprint of dad, just really allows us to unleash our expression. And so when we're really still living in these loyalties of, like, guilt and shame and, what do I need to do to still belong? This kind of idea where you still show up with your parents in the same way that you always did, or you show up in your family system kind of, maybe you go out into the world and you're a little more expressive, but then you come back into your family system and you kind of retract and kind of concede into that sort of familiar identity. Obviously, we will to some certain extent, but when our voices and our expression really, really becomes unleashed and it feels safe to become unleashed, we can actually move out in the world, and we can move out into how we interact with family and even the extended family, and we can actually still be in the openness of our expression. We actually don't know any other way, right? But we have to deal with the unconscious loyalties. And so, again, coming back to this woman's question of how do I shed the good girl conditioning to men, right? How do I channel some of that bad bitch energy? It really comes back to the family of origin and the ancestors of origin, dealing with guilt, dealing with unconscious loyalties that you have to not be in a healthy protection of your space, to not be in a healthy expression of your boundaries, to not be in a healthy expression of your anger. Ultimately, what it really, really means is a complete and total embodied validation of your reality, right? So when you think about expression, when people are really powerfully self-expressed, the origin, the foundation, the root that it comes from is, I am totally trusting. I am totally wholly embodied in what I know to be true as my perceived reality, right? What this is doing is it's giving us a very strong foundational point to lift off from as we move into the world, as we express ourselves. It's giving us a very, very strong sort of foundation that we can pull from when we speak, right? So if we don't have that strong foundation, if we haven't fully entered reality, if we're still holding on to sort of all these sort of unconscious loyalties, then our throat chakra is going to be holding a lot of trauma from the past. There's going to be a lot of interconnected cords that are holding on, right? Literally at like an ancestral level. we might actually feel that if we were to speak our voice and we were to speak our truth, that we would die, that we would be burned, that there would be some sort of, we'd be destroyed, right? If we have a lot of, abuse down the feminine line, the maternal ancestors experienced their power being taken away from men centuries back, then when it comes to actually moving into the expression of our voice, it feels really, really dangerous, right? We have all these sort of ancestral threads and cords that are holding in our throat chakra, probably coming from the back of our neck. Guys, so just so you know, generational entities show up at the back of the neck usually. The back of the neck correlates here to the throat, right? Back of the neck comes here right to the throat. And so the entity kind of shows up and it just kind of latches onto our throat. And at the basis of this is fear and terror of stepping into the complete embodiment of our truth, right? And so when we're holding a lot of these unresolved ancestral cords, that's going to play a massive factor into why we can't move into this absolute unleashed self-expression of our soul, right? So we got the ancestral pieces, we have the unconscious loyalties to mom and dad, and then the piece that I'm going to talk about here, which is really, really important. You guys, we either grow up in two type of households. We either grow up in a household that is a warm energy or a cold energy, right? And you could associate growing up in a home that has really cold energy, that it's more about discipline, it's more about obedience, it's more about structure, it's more about doing what you're told, right? So think about like a cold environment is a little more of this tough love. Well, you do what you're told, you become obedient, which is going to bring about a whole bunch of positive traits and a whole bunch of shadow traits. Think about you grow up in a really warm household. Maybe discipline's not as strong. It's all about creativity. It's all about self-expression. There's a lot of physical touch. There's a lot of words of affirmation. There's a lot of love. There's a lot of compassion. There's a lot of nurturing, but maybe there's not as much resilience that's developed. Maybe there's not as much hard work that's developed. Maybe there's not as much structure. We're a bit of sort of a lost soul, a little bit of sort of this Peter Pan syndrome. So you got a cold household and you got a warm household. The ideal way that we want to be fostered, right, to move into, let's say, a really sort of safe expression through actual and execution of the expression is that we're born into both a warm and cold intertwined. What that really means is that there's a really healthy combination of love, compassion, nurturing, but also that we're required to face our fears, to develop a sense of resiliency, a sense of autonomy, right? Sometimes if the household is too warm, there's a lack of autonomy that's created, which forms sort of this dependency. And so we want to have this sort of environment where if you think about you're like a little kid and you want to go out into the world and explore, but you want to be able, think about like a little boy, right? Like little boys are always exploring, right? And as a little boy, you want to be able to go out and sort of look and sort of chase that sort of freedom and adventure, but then be able to come back and have that safe place where you're going to experience compassion, where you're going to experience nurturing. So you want to have this sort of rite of passage to develop your own sense of regulation at some point in your system, your own sense of self-reliance, self-assuredness, right? Because if the environment that we grow up in is too warm, then it can create sort of this dependency, right? This sort of idea where we can't really move into our power. We can't really be this autonomous sort of individual adult self who can go kind of create his own sovereignty in the world. And so if we grow up in an overly cold environment, think about like what's going to be created in an overly cold environment. We're probably going to be very obedient. We're probably going to be really good at kind of following orders. You know what I mean? Potentially we might rebel against that, right? That might be one sort of archetype that is created. We kind of become the rebel, that kind of fights against this. Or we might just be someone that, follows the rules, follows the orders. And what happens when it's an overly cold environment is that our self-expression, our soul self, our creativity, the exploration and discovery of who we are in our soul, it's not fostered. It's not incubated, right? And so this is where maybe we go work a job that pays the bills that we're not really that passionate about. And we have this sort of deeper unfolding and sort of who we are that's not able to be self-expressed. I love when I'm just discovering what I'm talking about in the middle of speaking, because I know exactly where I'm going to take this, just to let you guys know. Because I never know what I'm going to talk about or anywhere it's going to go before I start speaking. I just find it in the middle. It's a fun practice. But to an overly sort of cold environment, we're going to be like, maybe I fucking go become a professional. You know what I mean? Maybe I become a fucking dentist. I don't know. I'm good with my hands. Maybe I wanted to open my own sort of carpentry business. Maybe I wanted to be a contractor. Maybe I wanted to do something different. But, I knew from what was rewarded in the family of origin that doing something practical, doing something pragmatic, doing something that was within the structure and systems that I knew. And so what happens is this fucker is still living for their parents. I say this to my dad all the time. My dad is, and it's okay, he won't say this so I can talk shit. It's all good. My dad's 71 and he's still living for the approval of his parents, right? His parents are fucking 93, 94, about to kick the bucket. Every day I'm like, Dad, is Nan and Papa, like, have they kicked the bucket yet? Right? And he's like, no, they're still kicking. I'm like, oh man. And he's 71 and he's still living for their approval because he grew up in an overly cold environment where he's got a hell of fucking work ethic. He's able to, get shit done. He's able to be really linear, really pragmatic. But what happens in that sort of environment is the depth in which we pull from, it's not that deep, right? This is where, like, a lot of dudes, they're maybe successful, but they're not operating in their genius zone. They're not operating in their genius zone, meaning they never really were fostered and incubated in an environment where they could really, really explore what they're great at. They couldn't really explore what made them special. They couldn't explore what they love to do. Pursuing a passion, so to speak, wasn't an option. And so this is where, like, a lot of men will operate in like a zone of excellence or take a safe route. And so what happens is actually expressing from our soul is a threat. Actually pursuing something that we're really passionate about, actually like allowing the expression and the vitality of who we are and the individualism. We become more of a sheep, not a wolf, right? We're not able to stand out on our own island. We have to sort of blend in. And that comes from sort of this overly cold, overly obedient parenting model that we would have grown up in, right? And so it makes us a hard worker, and, we're able to be really productive and efficient and get shit done. This task, point A, B, C, D. But the soul expression wasn't fostered, right? And so this is where a lot of men maybe, and people in general, maybe have midlife crises where they're like, I haven't really been pursuing what I want to sort of pursue. And so the challenge for them is going to be opening. These people, they're hard work. They're really into the earth. They're really sort of pragmatic. But the challenge is going to be opening to magic, more ethereal expression, more moving into the unknown, more self-expressing and discovering who we are without knowing where it's going, right? So that's the overly cold model. If we grow up in too warm of an environment, and I grew up in an environment that was too warm, so a lot of nurturing, a lot of compassion, I was in an environment where there was like not a lot of discipline, where there was a little bit, but it was, very much really warm. Your individualism was fostered. Your creativity was fostered. You could speak your soul. You could express yourself. I could wear crazy fucking outfits at school. My parents like, all right. It was in many ways, and my parents won't see this, so it's fine. It wasn't a knock on them. In many ways, like, I wasn't really raised. I wasn't really like raised through parenting. I was kind of like had to learn how to raise myself in many, many ways. There was no real sort of structure or system that I was fostered in, which is why for so long it was really challenging for me to be connected to my masculine energy, to be structured, to be able to get shit done, to be more linear, to be more pragmatic, very sort of like little boy Peter Pan living in fantasy, creativity, big ideas, but lack of action, right? And so, but what happened for me, and I always say that I'm able to express myself so much because I was hugged too much as a child. I was told by like my mom, like, Jamie, you're special. Jamie, you're special. Mom, you fucked me up. But that's the reason why I can express so wildly in the way that I can, and it doesn't even bat an eyelash in my system. I can just say this crazy shit, and literally I'm so regulated my nervous system when I do it, because part of that is just who I am, but I'd say the biggest part is how I was raised. And to the credit and the detriment, I was raised in too warm of a parenting model. And so what the shadow of being raised in too warm of a parenting model is that you struggle with discipline, execution, action, structure, work ethic, resilience. There's a lot of fear, a lot of fear. You're too coddled, you're too nurtured, when it actually goes out into like feeling yourself out in the world, when you don't have that dependency, you don't have those cords of reliance on other people. Little boy's fucking terrified, right? So think about like little boy or little girl coming from an obedient model. When it comes to actually expressing our soul, that's where like the scared little boy or girl comes up when it comes up. But for when we're raised in like an overly warm environment, scared little boy, scared little girl comes when it's actually like moving out into the world on our own, individuating, being our own person out in the world. And so the reason, you guys, why I'm talking about this, because the intersection of these two pieces is how you unleash your self-expression. The intersection of, I call it kind of the unsexy qualities: discipline, work ethic, structure, systems, being pragmatic, being connected to the earth, being grounded. That combined with this openness, with this expressing your emotions and feelings, this being able to be in your creativity, to being able to be in your uniqueness, your specialness, your individualism, the intersection of the two is where we're able to, and the way I'm going to frame this, execute self-expression on earth, right? So, for example, my story for so long, which I wouldn't say that I've completely healed, but I've made a massive dent in, and I'm currently making massive, massive progress in. The story was that I'm this talented, sort of gifted person with all these things to offer, but I'll never be able to actually execute and live in real time my potential here on earth. So I always felt there's so much here, and I always feared, and probably still is one of the greatest fears, that I'll never be able to actualize all that potential. And so much of that comes from being fostered in this environment of warm expression, right? But a lack of sort of the structure and the foundation to be able to allow that expression to be able to live out in the world, right? I forget the name of the therapist, has this really great way that we deal with unworthiness. It's Steven something. I forget who it is. So say we grow up in a really warm environment. The way that unworthiness will probably show up for us is that I'm fucking amazing. He calls this one up, right? So the way that we deal with a sense of inherent unworthiness, a lack of belonging, is we put ourselves on a pedestal and we make ourselves extra special, right? And so really what this is the ego's way of protecting against a deeper part of us feels unworthy. Say we grew up in a really, really sort of cold environment. It's likely that the way unworthiness will show up is that I'm a piece of shit, that I'm not good enough, right? It will usually show up like that, which is called one down. So unworthiness shows up that we're going to go one up. I'm amazing. I'm the best that's ever lived. Or we're going to go one down. I'm a piece of shit. I'm horrible. I'm never going to amount to anything. But both are covering up the deeper core wound of unworthiness, just in a different sort of way, right? And so my work, for example, was, okay, how do I create the foundation? How do I sort of create the structure so that my expression could be able to be actualized on earth, right? Really, that my potential could be realized, right? And you could say, like, we grow up in a really cold environment and it's not safe to sort of be in our expression. We got to be obedient. That we're gonna have a similar thing, that like I'm never gonna be able to. I feel that I have these talents that I haven't really been able to discover, that I haven't really been able to foster and create. And so we built the capacity to work, but probably work at things that we're not really passionate about, that aren't really true to our soul, that we don't really feel like we're accessing all of ourselves. We're actually accessing a small fraction, right? Whereas for me, it was like I always felt like I was accessing all of myself. Was constantly discovering, I was seeking, I was bringing new parts of me. But when it came to actually like allowing everything that I had living inside of me to really tangibly be able to create it into like a functional business, to be able to birth sort of creative things that really existed in real time, to be able to be the person who could um, capitalize, execute, and create on my potential. And I could allow that to live in the world, right? So that became my work. And when I went through my sort of spiritual initiation and my rite of passage, I had to really come to the earth. I had to become grounded. I had to like open up sort of my root chakra. I had to be able to move into reality. I had to be able to, exist in my own sort of energy and time and place and know that I was going to be okay. I had to learn to self actualize, to be able to take care of myself, to be able to individuate, right? So much of my initiation, it was two things. It was two things, right? Being able to move more into magic and being able to move more down into the earth, right? And so when I went through my initiation, yes, it was about moving more into magic, but it was really, really about actually being able to ground me, right? Actually being able to bring all the energy that I had, all the different things that I had to offer to be able to bring them to the earth. And now through this process, like I said, I've made a big dent in it and I'm actually in real time healing this aspect of me. But this is how you unleash your self expression, right? So if you think about somatically, Robin W., my parents were divorced and one household was too warm and one was too cold. I spent time in both. Does a warm, cold environment correlate with avoidant attachment, disorganized attachments? So you grew up in two different households. That's wild how you got to experience both, because obviously not an ideal situation, obviously, right? To have to just go being a child of divorce in any which way. But the fact that you, in obviously an unorthodox way, and I actually know a lot of friends that had similar situations. Um, Even just my ex-girlfriend and her kids, because my ex-girlfriend was divorced and her kids grew because her and her ex were really, really different. And so in a way, you get a blend of both, but also in a way that's going to lead to like really herky jerky sort of situation where all of a sudden you're opening in one environment, right? You're in this warm environment and then you move into this cold environment. It's like a shock to your system. It's like a real sort of like abrasiveness on your system. Like, oh, and, you know, so shifting. And to your question, does the warm cold 100% that is going to dictate just our attachment? Because if you even think about like our attachment wiring, right? Think about it like a, having more of this, say, disorganized or more of this sort of avoidant attachment or more of this anxious attachment. So much of it is the secure attachment of mom and dad. So much of it is just the emotional center of mom and dad, the presence of mom and dad. And if we're growing up in a cold environment, it means at least one parent is going to be probably very emotionally withdrawn. So if the environment we grow up in is too cold, it probably means that our parents struggle with self-expression, right? It probably means there's a lack, because when we think of warmth, we think of that someone's emotions and their own expression is coming through them, right? So there's a sense of warmth, nurturing, gentleness, compassion that comes through. And so if the environment that we grow up in is really, really cold, it means at least one parent was probably super, super emotionally disconnected, right? Which is obviously going to massively impact our attachment wiring. Even think about if it was our mom that was really emotionally disconnected, then we're going to be being fostered in the womb from a parent who's probably going to be quite emotionally disconnected to what's being created in the womb. And if it's our dad, right, then we would have constantly experienced these breaks in connection with our dad where, maybe our dad's holding us, but he's not fucking present. Maybe he's distracted. There's other sort of shit that's going on. He's still trying to deal with his own shit from his parents. So 100%, Robin, that's going to influence our attachment wiring. And even just as we kind of are incubated in that environment, we're going to learn, is it secure? Is it safe for me to bring my emotions? And also, here's the thing, you guys, about emotions is that we learn what emotions are safe. So we watch our parents to see. So growing up, the only emotion that I was really probably connected to was, I mean, fear, but like not in a healthy way, and anger. I was really, really connected to anger. So I would witness anger, but like, grief, sadness, so disconnected from joy, struggled with. And so we're going to watch what emotions that our parents are connected to. We're going to observe that. And then it's also going to be about what emotions are received well, right? For example, for me, I learned when I was in anger that I could get away with having to do shit. If I was in my anger, it'd be like, you're grounded. I'd be like, fuck you, dad. I'm not fucking grounded. And my anger, they wouldn't know what to do with it. Like I was a wild child. I would just get fucking pissed off and they'd be like, I guess fine, no discipline. And so I learned that I could get away with my anger in an unhealthy way, right? But deep underneath that, there was just a lot of pain. It took away childhood to flip-flop between the two and have the two. Yeah, that is like so taxing on the nervous system, particularly when you're so young and you don't have the tools. I've actually witnessed this in kids before, and the challenge where what can eventually happen is that, say we're in the cold environment and we're moving into a bit of like a freeze or like a fawn response and a bit of a shutdown, and then it moves into a space where we can't transition, and like when we move into more of the open environment, we're not able to. That we slowly become more and more withdrawn. We slowly become more avoidant, right? And I would say there's probably a strong likelihood to create a disorganized attachment. A disorganized attachment is obviously a combination of anxious and avoidant, which is for example, I'm a secure attachment, but my main subtype is disorganized / anxious avoidant / fear driven. Also, you guys, disorganized attachment is really, really created and really fostered when there's a lot of turbulence when we're being created in the womb. So when we're in the womb, depending on what the emotional nervous system sort of spectrum was in our environment with our primary caregivers, that can really, really foster a fear-driven attachment wiring. So when we have this crazy debilitating fear, it always leads me to like, what was the emotional environment when we were being generated and fostered in the womb, which is a big one. And so you guys, this idea going back to, disorganized here, womb trauma from avoidant and cheating dad. I had the exact same situation basically. So much womb trauma is correlated to disorganized attachment, right? Which is basically that we're going to flip-flop between the both, but at the root of it, there's fear. Fear of like really everything, that we associate the world and the universe as an unsafe place, right? Because you think about it, our primary caregivers and the emotional environment and the nervous system sort of spectrum that they create for us is how we foster our earliest relationship to the universe and the world. Is the universe a safe place? Is the universe, can it be trusted? That's really being fostered as early as when we're in the womb, right? And so, womb trauma, birth trauma, meaning there's a lot of complications when we're coming out of the womb. Maybe we experience some sort of physical sort of challenge, disability is going to be very connected to disorganized attachment. And I can relate that from my experience, which essentially is just dealing with fear in the body. I always say that disorganized attachment is like fuck off, but love me. Come towards me, but fucking get the fuck out of here. It's like so contradictory. It's like you want both things, and you like, because and in a way, it's like you want people to leave you alone, but you want to be included. It's kind of like disorganized attachment is like, I don't want to come, but I want you to beg me to come to your party. Like, I'm not going to come to your party, but I want you to beg for me to come to your party. Like, that's like what disorganized attachment is. And I see how that plays out in my life, where it's like, you like want to beat to your own drum and like do your own thing and like fuck other people, but you want to belong and you want to be included, right? So it's like really this kind of contention of ideas is really common with this disorganized attachment. But you guys, coming back to this idea of how do you unleash your self-expression? If you think about it somatically, right? So, how do you unleash your self expression? The throat chakra has got to be wide open, right? But somatically, how is our throat going to open? I've had people like clients come to me. They're like, I want to move into my self expression. I want to be able to like be free and express myself. But their like root chakra is so closed, right? And so the throat chakra is only really going to open proportional to how open the root is, to how open the sacral is, to how open the lower chakras are, right? So if you're like, Jamie, how do I deal with the somatics of like a blocked throat chakra? Well, you have to like look at the foundational pieces that will support and supplement the opening of the throat, right? If we grow up in like an overly cold environment, then, say we have all these barriers in sort of our throat chakra that maybe we're connected to like these pragmatic ideas. We're grounded. We're able to take action. It doesn't really mean that the root chakra is open, right? So we could be really productive. We could be really, really fucking linear, but it doesn't mean the root chakra is open, right? Even though we feel really connected to the earth, it doesn't mean the root chakra is open. The way the root chakra actually opens is that we unwind the system from the core survival identity. However, we grew up in the family of origin and we found value worth. We have to unwind the nervous system from that identity so the root can open. And that helps facilitate the opening of the throat. For example, even me growing up in this sort of overly warm environment, it's like I was connected to my self-expression in some ways, but I was also a really big people pleaser. Also really struggled to like speak my directive truth in relationships. I found a lot of value and worth from being very likable, from being high energy, from being very charismatic. I found a lot of worth and value from being popular, from having so many friends, from having this personality that like being someone that everyone liked, right? I found a lot of value and worth. And so while many ways growing up in this warm environment, I was connected to my self-expression. I also really wasn't, right? Because I wasn't really able to sort of speak my truth, like really, really be able to speak my truth. I was out of integrity in certain ways, right? And so really, and now this is coming to this point, which is I think where we're going to kind of begin to end this kind of whole topic of unleashing your self-expression. And I think I'm going to have to do another live on this at some point. It's such a big topic. How do you unleash your self-expression? So many directions you can go. There's so many steps. There's so much that's involved in this. But so now what happens, right? As you're unwinding from this core survival identity, you're actually beginning to open up your root chakra. Now and you're beginning to connect more to the womb and to your cock. Now you're creating the support and facilitation for your throat and your expression to open more directly, more authentically and deeper, right? And so when we think of like a self-expression that is really, really unleashed, it's really powerful, really polarizing. But let's say the self-expression runs really deep in their body, right? So when you think of someone that's really self-expressed, I want you guys to think about it that the volume of authenticity that they're pulling from within themselves is really, really deep, right? Somatically, what that would mean is that, for example, when someone speaks, say a woman speaking, she's speaking from her womb, she's speaking from her hips, she's speaking from her thighs. Like where the actual reverberation and octave of her voice is coming from is being pulled from a really, really deep part of her body, right? This is why you'll see that when women are really, really armored, really disconnected to their womb, sometimes so they might have just a much deeper voice, right? Same with men. They might have kind of a higher voice. They might have a voice that feels a little nasally. It feels it's kind of shut down. It doesn't really run with a lot of bass. It's not coming from a deep well. That is disconnection to the womb, disconnection to the cock. So much of opening the throat chakra is opening the sacral chakra. And the way that the sacral chakra opens is that the root chakra has to open first, right? The root has to open, which is going to help set the foundation for the cock and the womb to open. And so if you want to think about someone who's really, really unleashed in their self-expression, it means that whatever they're expressing, is they're expressing from the deepest possible wells of their body and their being, right? When someone is executing on something really true in their space and they're taking action on something that's soul generated and soul driven, it's actually coming from the deepest confines of their body. It's coming from the deepest sort of wells of their essence and their being, right? It's coming from the deepest parts of them. And when we've done this, when we've sort of carved out this depth and volume of authenticity with ourselves, we're able to hold our expression more in the wide open. We're able to hold the exposure, as I've talked about at different times, right? We're able to hold standing on our own island. And what this really means is, in a way, guys, and to bring it full circle so this begins to make sense, in a way, what has happened is we have learned to reparent ourselves or re-alchemize in our body sort of the warm and cold household. We've kind of have learned to reparent our sovereign human adult body, our divine being, with sort of the best attributes of the cold environment and the warm environment. So meaning we can be really in a sense of compassion, heart, creativity, expression, following our soul, pursuing our passion, chasing our dreams, but we're also like really structured. We're really, really disciplined. We're really pragmatic in the earth. We're able to, like, with the really of the earth sort of like unsexy qualities, the discipline, the hard work. We have the resilience to face fears, to kind of be in the unknown where we don't know what's going to happen. We have this level of trust and resilience in ourselves to pursue with the soul expression. When those two combine, that's when greatness happens. That's when we actually can actualize on our potential here on earth. That's when we actually begin to liberate our dreams. That's when we actually have our throat that is so expansive and open, and we're speaking sort of the scriptures of God, but pulled all the way from the deepest parts of our being, because we've re-alchemated, we've reacclimatized the cold and warm household in the body through our own sort of rite of passage to becoming our own reparent, to dealing with the energetic imprint of mom and dad, to being able to tell our ancestors to fuck off. We've created a level of sovereignty in our space, and we've taken the best aspects of our childhood and we've integrated the shadow, right? So for me, part of what I'm here to do and part of the gift of how I was raised is that I'm able to be so unhinged in my self-expression. But the shadow of that, the dark underbelly of that, is that I couldn't be with those cold household sort of qualities that would allow the level of expression I held to alchemize and to actualize here on earth. And so much of me is, as I've gone through my journey, I've created the foundational support, the best attributes of the cold household that I didn't have, the rite of passage, the tough love, the resilience, the discipline, the work ethic that I didn't really have growing up. And when I pair that with the self-expression that I was given, I'm able to actually live out my code. And I'm actually able to live out my gift here on earth to inspire people to move into deeper aspects of themselves, to claim and recalibrate every single part of their being, to move into their unhinged, sort of disruptor energy of their absolute greatest divine potential. And that's the gift that I offer, and a gift that I was given, but I had to learn how to earn and how to learn how to actualize here on earth. And so wherever you are in the spectrum, know that what you're trying to do is you're trying to reintegrate and reacclimatize some combination of the warm and household in your body. You're trying to give a foundation for your heart to open, for your actual directive power to be explored. So somatically, really what this is that the root and the sacral, or this firm foundation, bring you down to the earth, bring you down to the earth. I'm in the earth, I'm in the earth, but the throat can open. And eventually, you guys, we're wanting to get to a place. The image I use with this idea of like, how do you become a disruptor? Like, how do you kind of fuck shit up? The image I use is that you're on your own island and there's like a little channel of water, like a really, really small channel of water. On the other side is your entire family lineage just looking at you. Entire family lineage, you know, with all the repression, with all the depression, with all the lack of expression, like everything. They're on this other side of this channel and they're viewing you. They're viewing you. They're looking at you. And your entire throat is illuminated. Your entire throat chakra is glowing. and your entire lineage is witnessing your entire throat is glowing. They're saying, holy shit, Jamie's throat, the expression that's moving through him, through the directivity of his voice, is totally anointed and connected to God. And the lineage can see that. And now what you're saying is that my voice, my expression, I will not play within the confines of sort of the unconscious loyalties of the family of origin and the ancestors of origin. That I will allow the illumination expression of my glowing sort of throat chakra here to move into the divine. And I will express even if it disrupts, even if it will create an illicit contraction, even if it will create an illicit uncomfortability in the family of origin, even if, my sister, even if my parents sort of concede a little bit in that space, even if the family of origin is like, Jamie, you're too much. Jamie, you're too much. No, I'm going to sit and hold myself in the illumination because I know that I'm living in the full integrity of my expression, of what I'm here to do. And you know this when your throat is fully glowing and you can feel the full voice of God that comes through you in the directivity of this expression. What it really means, you guys, is you can hold the vastness, the infinite possibility of your expression, and it's also held in the earth. It's also held in the earth. It's held completely in the earth, and it's like this. It's like this, right? It's like this. We're moving down, and so that means we can experience magic. We can go to the moon because our feet are on earth. And this is the space where we can hold exposure and we can disrupt without even really trying to disrupt. We just disrupt. For me personally, people get triggered by me and contract in my space, and it's not even on my radar because I'm not trying to be a disruptor. It's just I just allow the energy that moves through me, and I don't contain it. I don't contract it. I just allow it to express freely. And if it's too much, it's too much. I'm not even aware of it because it's just what I've allowed to live through me. And eventually we sort of get to this place where just whatever moves through us, that we allow it. There's no parking brakes. There's no sort of contraction, compartmentalization. It just flows through us. And eventually in this space, our expression can expand beyond the attachment of the family of origin and the ancestors of origin. And now we move into more of like a divine expression. Now the throat chakra is opening in sort of the realms of divine creation, that we can be directive and authentic in a way fully of the divine, right? But it all comes, the starting point is this sort of warm and cold household, right? And the unique sort of imprint and combination that we come from, and the intersection, the healthy intersection is where we can unleash our self-expression and hold it, right? Because we want to be able to unleash our self-expression, and we want to be able to be unleashed, that we're not trying to be unleashed, that just our normal expression feels unleashed to someone that's not unleashed, that we're just in our normal expression. It feels vibrant and powerful. And also that it feels like just deeply authentic to who we are. Because when it comes to our expression, you guys, all we want is that we want our expression to feel deeply authentic to who we are. We want to feel that the imprint that we're creating through the expression of our humanity are completely distinct to who we are. Are there spaces or times where you don't unleash your expression, where you zip it up more? Yeah, totally. I would say what happens more now is that it's more like a dial. I would say now I'm at the point in my expression where it kind of moves like a dial. Like you imagine like sort of like a mixing board, and say there's like 10 sort of illuminating dots. Sometimes I'll bring it to a 5, and sometimes I'll go to like a 10, right? When I'm doing things like this, when I'm in this domain, when I'm teaching, when I'm running groups, like, when I'm doing my voice recordings, I'm basically, I'm high. I'm high on the spectrum, right? There's no holding. But obviously, like you're around, for example, high school friends or friends that aren't sort of in this space, I'm still myself, but there's aspects of myself that I don't really bring to the table, right? And so I would say at times in the past, there would have been more of like a shutdown to that, but now it's more of like, I consider it like a dial down. So I dial down and dial up, which is normal, right? Because no matter how expressive you come, you're going to kind of perceive your environment. But what's just going to happen is slowly, as you expand more and more into it, you're going to be able to hold it more. You're going to be able to hold it more, right? And you're not going to kind of contract. And what happens, you guys, is that typically, and we want to talk about good girl conditioning, we want to talk about like good boy conditioning, people pleaser shit, is think about your expression, you guys, and think about like your most unleashed self-expression. When we contract and concede into sort of the unconscious sort of loyalty and volume parameter of the space, right? And so, it's kind of like when you're in real Does it feel like strain when you dial it down? It is uncomfortable for me. Yeah, I don't like it. And that's why, Robin, like I really, now I'm at a point where I really avoid spaces where I really have to dial down. I can deal with like a subtle dial down. I can kind of fluctuate a little bit, but when I really like can't be myself, what it does is it brings up so much anger around not being seen and being misunderstood and not being heard that I like to protect myself. I can't really be in those environments because it brings up so much anger inside of me for not being seen, heard, or understood. And when I've cultivated that so deeply in myself, it's such a distinct shift and change of like, I see myself so clearly. And so when I'm in an environment where I'm dialed down and contracted and I so don't feel seen, when I foster that so much, it's so tough on me. And so I have a real hard time. So I very much resonate with that. But yeah, you want to be able to be in a space where you don't kind of move to the parameters, right? So think about it like, you're at a family dinner. It's like, oh, we don't talk about that. We don't say these things, right? Or, you're around old friends that are more surface relationships. We don't express what's really going on, or we don't talk about our emotions, or we don't talk about spirituality. A really good sort of practice is actually to disrupt those systems, right? In places where you feel there's kind of this invisible sort of box of expression that you have to live within, practice meeting the edge of that box, right? Practice. And this is what I always do. Me being someone who, like being really into comedy and humor and comedy being a big part of my life. I just naturally do this with comedy. When people are kind of uptight, I love to make the dirty jokes, or in really inappropriate environments, I love to make the dirty jokes because a lot of times, or make a joke when you shouldn't, because a lot of times you get responses from people you didn't think you would. And it's also a way of vetting someone, because people you are like, this, no way this person, but you actually get to know a deeper aspect of someone that they were almost afraid to bring forward. So comedy and humor is so useful for bringing truth and authenticity and cutting out all the bullshit. And so with your expression, guys, and maybe this is going to be my challenge for anyone that's watching this, anyone that's going to be listening to the recording, and we're going to cut this at an hour, which is going to be perfect. There you go, Jamie. Dialed the fuck in. There we go, baby. That cold household's coming through, baby. We're dialed into the structure here. But the challenge can be to, in an environment where you feel there is that sort of invisible box where your expression has to live. Common places would be family dinner, old friends that you aren't that close with. Those are probably two of the most common environments. Maybe like within work, within sort of a work environment. You know what I mean? Practice like saying something or living in an expression of yourself that moves right to the edge and maybe a little bit beyond the edge. So maybe that is like saying something, maybe it's a topic, or maybe it's cultivating a level of embodied expression in who you are that you don't usually bring forward, right? And this is really practiced, you guys, in how we express in our extended family, how we express to our siblings, to our parents, how we express in sort of like work colleague environments, also in how we express in different tiers of friends, how we express with strangers, with people we don't know. So the interesting thing about me is like, I don't really act really different around a stranger or a friend I've known my whole life. Like if I spend a weekend with strangers, I'm going to be like acting the same. I don't really change who I am, which is, again, has gotten me into trouble because I don't usually pay attention to those diameters, right? And I just like speak as if I've known these people my entire life, which is, again, being brought up in too warm of a household, because I don't really play to rules and regulations, right? I rebel against that shit. Like, I don't even know what the fucking rules are. But the challenge is to practice with either saying something, a topic, or an embodied expression of who you are to meet the edge of maybe just what you perceive to be the edge of sort of that invisible sort of structure of expressing, saying too much, being too much. Because if you want to be a disruptor very authentically, not from a space of ego, but from everything that is being created within you, to be a disruptor, to be unleash your self-expression, you do push boundaries, right? And I know for me being an artist that I can't concede to the rules and regulations. I can't concede to these invisible dynamics, because what I'm here to create and how I'm meant to impact the earth through my work as a teacher and through my work as an artist will be impacted and diluted in a way where the imprint that I'm meant to make won't have its full volume of impact. And so I'm very cognizant of that. And that's why usually artists are very self-expressed and unleashing their expression, because it's how they cultivate their art and their work, right? And so practice meeting the edge, you guys. Practice moving into the expression of disrupting. Maybe that's having an uncomfortable conversation with one of your parents, bringing up something and pushing an edge and holding that space. And just what you do, you guys, is you build the tolerance and a bandwidth for it, right? You build a tolerance and a bandwidth of being able to be in that space where you can actually feel people are uncomfortable by how you're acting, what you're saying, how you're showing up, maybe the size and bigness of how you're showing up. You can feel the discomfort, the contraction of other people, and you're like, shine on, baby. Feel my light just penetrating you. And it's a good practice to build that bandwidth and tolerance inside of you. And it gets incrementally easier and easier, and you can hold it more in your nervous system without contracting or receding back into kind of those unconscious loyalties, those little, faux sort of, in quotations, rules and regulations. So I want you guys to take that with you to in one of those areas of conformity, or what your perceived conformity, or one of those areas where you feel the need to dial down, or you feel the need to contain or contract aspects of your expression. Don't expand when you feel the desire to contract. Where you feel everyone's sort of just playing by these rules, see if you can get bigger. See if you can take up more space. See if you can push the boundaries, because that is how you become a disruptor in a very authentic way, because this is actually through the execution and actualization of your soul and its potential here on earth. And we need all of us. We need all of us to unleash our self-expression so that we can deliver our unique energetic imprint and the secret sauce that we're here to deliver here on earth. That's it for me, everyone. Unleash your self-expression. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into my motherfucking TED Talk. Let's go, baby. Post your questions in the comment section. Let me know anything that resonated with you, anything that you feel true and alive. Like and subscribe this video. I will be doing these live YouTube sessions, discussions every Monday and Friday at 12 p.m. PST Pacific time. Much love to everyone, and wishing you all a great weekend. Peace out.